And drum rolling, ladies and gentlemen, you are welcome to the PWI Convo, simply people who inspire conversation, happening live here on YouTube. My name is Emmanuel Mbansi, host of the PWI Convo. Today you are in for an amazing conversation centered around harnessing storytelling for fundraising success. In case you are an entrepreneur, running a project, trying to do a fundraiser, however way, whatever you're trying to do in one way or the other, each one of us need to master the power of storytelling for us to be able to, significantly impact the success of our projects and scale up our knowledge in fundraising, which is really important. And so today we have an amazing personality from the PWI network who will be sharing and unraveling a lot of tips and a lot of great steps. I have to take my time. A lot of great steps to, harnessing the power of storytelling for your fundraising success. And so today we have a dear friend. I have a dear friend of mine who I call him Twahi, but his full name is Tini Sebankunzi, all the way from Switzerland, who is joining us today to help us unravel, to fully grasp and understand more about this chosen topic for discussion today. You know what? I want to challenge you. Go to somebody's DM right away, copy the link of this conversation and share with just three friends, and put it on your status. Let's create a watch party. Let's make this not just a conversation, but a movement. Are you ready? Now let's invite a dear friend, my good friend, Tini Sebankunzi. He is a mentor for social entrepreneurship, sustainable development leader, and storytelling coach. A warm welcome to you, my dear friend, Twahi.
Hi, Emmanuel. It's great to meet you and great to be here with you.
And how are you doing today?
But I'm doing good, thank you. I just came back from the gym, so I've got a lot of energy. I like to do a lot of exercise in the morning to start the day. It just wakes me up, even if I haven't had that much sleep. So that's how I'm feeling right now. I'm actually training for a 10-kilometer race happening in a couple of weeks. Well, I'm on a waiting list. I'm waiting to get a spot. So I'm working on that. So I always feel good in the morning. So that gives me a lot of energy.
Of course, one thing that really always stands out for me is he has over 2 decades of experience in sustainable development, fundraising, and coaching social entrepreneurs across the world. And he's the global fellow at Acumen. And of course, he's based in Switzerland. It is very important to actually mention that. But he's deeply connected to the African and MENA entrepreneurial ecosystem. And of course, he's the master of using storytelling as a tool for transformation. And Twahi, that's why we have you here today. And so welcome. And please take a moment to tell us a little bit about what you do before we give you the ultimate drum roll.
To answer your question of what do I do, I like to summarize in this way. I wear 4 hats, basically. My first hat is I work as a partnership manager for an NGO called Global Solidarity Institute. And the organization, its mission is to really focus on improving the livelihoods of refugees, migrants, internally displaced people in the areas of job creation and healthcare. And I think the unique essence of this organization is we are working to build a bridge between the church institutions and the governments and the private sector and development agencies and NGOs. In this world, we do see a lack of collaboration, and we want to create that collaboration because everybody brings a strength to it. And the idea is to join forces to create more of a stronger impact. So, as a partnership manager, I design grants, I select grants, I provide grants. We did some fundraising to the organization to get some funds, of course, and also do a lot of monitoring. So once the grants have been disbursed, I go there, meet the organization on the ground in Africa and Latin America, and build stories and explain to the donors, here's what we did. Here's the change. So I do a lot of storytelling, so to speak, through the reports back to the donors. So I manage that relationship as well.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Good to know. Um, in this very important conversation, we always highlight our esteemed speakers, and of course, is this is the PWI conversation where we bring the best brains from around the world, where we also get to meet the visionaries who are shaping lives and systems globally. And so today, on this exciting conversation, just to ensure that we are properly aligned, we are going to first break the ice to set the tone for the discussion. And so our icebreaker fun today is very simple. I'm going to keep it very simple. Just two icebreakers and then we are in. The first is, Twahi, if your life story were a movie title, what would it be?
Oof. Good question about a movie. I think I would use Sliding Doors. Now I'm stealing it because there's a movie actually called Sliding Doors. You can Google it. But the reason I say that is because I love the concept of it. And Sliding Doors is pretty much the concept is about when you look at your life, there are key moments in life when you have different opportunities. You have to make a decisions, A or B or C. And when I look back at my life, some decision, had I taken option B, my life would be totally different. So I took option A. But I didn't know at the time. But when I look back, oh my God, I would not be where I am if I didn't take my option A, basically. But it's sort of interesting to look at these key moments. So if I was to do a movie about my life, I would focus on those moments, these key moments in my life when I had to make a decision. Now, I've been privileged because I had opportunities. I've been given options. So I'm lucky in that sense. So I would say Sliding Doors.
I thought as much. And of course, you have a Rwandan origin. And of course, you live in Switzerland. So the question is, Swiss chocolate or Rwandan coffee, which gives the best storytelling energy?
Wow, good question. I would say Swiss chocolate. Probably because I don't drink coffee. So I wouldn't know about the storytelling in Rwandan coffee. Probably because I don't drink coffee, so I don't look for coffee. So I wouldn't know. The coffee stories that I see is mostly about Uganda, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Colombia. But Rwanda has coffee, of course. So I would say Swiss chocolate because everybody talks about Swiss chocolate. So I say that's very big. So I would pick that. But it's because I don't drink coffee, whereas I eat chocolate.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Let's get right into today's convo. Well, it's always important to, have a background of everything that we talk about. And so let's look at the origin of the man, Jini. So we're going to explore your personal story, your early career, and how you discovered the power of storytelling. So my question is very simple. Take us back to the beginning. How did your journey in social entrepreneurship and sustainable development begin?
So I think where my chapter of sustainable started with is it's a kind of a curse and a gift at the same time. I was born in the Republic Democratic of Congo. That's where my family was living. And then we moved to Switzerland when I was little. So we witnessed the horrific episode of genocide from a distance. My parents, of course. We didn't lose that many family members. But I went back intentionally almost every Christmas for a period of 3 to 4 years. I went back in 97, 3 years after the genocide. So you can only imagine what that was like. But what I was pleasantly surprised over the years is how the country just transformed in a positive way. So I asked myself a lot of questions. How does a country get out of poverty in general? So I started reading a lot of books, etc. But that started there. But then the really key moment was actually going to Brazil. This is probably very unexpected, but I did a sabbatical in Brazil for 6 months. And it was amazing. And I left the private sector. I needed a break. And I went there to study anthropology and learn about Afro-Brazilian culture in Brazil. But through that work, I went to university to learn about anthropology. We talked a lot about the NGOs and development work and cultures. And I realized I was working with local NGOs and I want to work in that space, sustainable development, because ultimately that work is all about people. It's how do you improve and transform the lives of the people through new innovative solutions. That's how I describe sustainable development, in the good for the planet as well, of course. But that's probably where it all started.
Wow, that's impressive. That's an impressive journey you've got there. But by the way, at what point did storytelling become a central part of how you approached development and fundraising? I'm really curious to know, and I know our listeners as well curious.
Oh, storytelling. I can tell you a very key moment when that came to me. It was when I was working at Max. So I mentioned before I was 3 years in Nigeria, and in 2018 I was hired by one of the investors who invested in a startup called Max Nigeria. You probably know it now, but it was a very young company at the time, founded by 2 Nigerians. Ultimately, they were providing sustainable transport for the locals. At the time, it was focusing on okadas, motorcycles, and providing motorcycles in a safe, transportable way. And basically 2 months into the job, the company I was not involved in it had applied for a pitch competition, and they were selected in the final round. Global competition. They were the only African representative. And it was in Dubai. And the founder, for different reasons, couldn't go. So he asked me to go on their behalf. So I had to pitch the company. I'd only be there for 2 months. So like a month prior to the trip, I think every night after work, we would work on a pitch. So they gave me the deck, they gave me the slides, but they would challenge me on every answer. No, you can't say that because it's their baby. It's their organization. They know their vision and so on. But ultimately, when I went there for the competition, we won it, thankfully. That was a great experience. We won the competition. Is when we talk to the investors, when you're pitching to investors, ultimately, you talk about your journey. I used to think you talk about your business model, your revenue stream, your financial model, your customer acquisition, etc., which is very important, technical. But investors won't remember you pitch for that. They remember your story. They remember, okay, why did you start this company? What are you trying to solve? What motivated you to start this company? Why is your solution any better than any other solution? How does that help people? Why would people be interested in your solution? Those type of questions they're asking themselves. And then how much traction are you getting? But it's a whole journey. So you're basically building a story from beginning, middle, and end. It's a story. So I realized it was just all about the story, basically. So that's how I got involved in storytelling. How I really realized the importance of storytelling when it comes to pitching.
Wow, that's impressive. That's impressive. I mean, Jini, you've worked across NGOs, private sector, investment funds. What common challenge do you notice when it comes to sharing impact stories?
Well, the challenges of impact stories, I think, is looking at the human element. Whatever intervention you're trying to do when it comes to impact is ultimately how you're changing that person's life. So, for example, if you're working a project in agriculture, how is your solution changing the daily life of a farmer? So you have to give a story of here's what a farmer goes through typically every day or every harvesting season. My solution or my intervention, here's how his day is going to be different in a positive way. And once you can do that, it's way more easier. But I do still see people focus a lot more on the technical side, which is understandable. But you start with that, people will remember that. So I still see sometimes that is missing, but I try and I make the same mistake myself. So I try to remind myself, okay, remember the human element. So I always try to do that or add like a testimonial and so on. So that would probably be the one I'm thinking about.
Now, let's talk about storytelling as a fundraising superpower. Of course, it's important to really dive deep into how storytelling becomes a powerful tool to raise funds and rally support. And of course, I always ask this each time we meet, But before I actually ask the main question, let's get into the heart of it. What makes a great fundraising story?
Oh, a great fundraising story. I think we share my time when I was at Max again in Nigeria. It was such interesting, innovative time. I was only there for 6 months, but I got so many stories from that experience. I learned so much.
Wonderful. Wow, that's impressive. Thank you very much for sharing. But can you give us a real life example where a powerful story helped secure funding or build a movement from your previous experiences and encounters? And could you share some with us?
And one of the things I remember and again, human element, I mentioned before. I always want to focus on human elements. And I remember having conversation with different motor taxi riders. And we're trying to understand, remember, this is a company that's focusing on helping providing safe transport using motor taxis. So motor taxi riders were important to the business. Trying to understand their experience joining our company before what they were doing before. And they were doing this informally, illegally. So typically, rider was coming with us because he used to work illegally. So he come with us, a legal company, and he gets a salary, etc. And I remember having a great conversation with one guy, and I share this a lot to people, which ultimately tells what Max is all about. One writer said that, what I love about Max, yes, I earn more income. Of course, that's very important. But the level of stress is so much lower at Max, and that's priceless. I remember he said that. And what the reason he said is because before, when he was working illegally, so to speak, the police force, of course, would try and arrest them and find them and get their licenses. It was a nightmare. So for him, every time he was taking people, because this is a community of riders to speak to each other. If he was taking from group A to point A to point B, another rider says, hey, don't go through that street because there's a police guy looking for motorcycles. So I'd have to stress myself, think about different routes. But with Max, because we are known as a legit company and all the bikes were branded yellow, so it was easy to see the ones, the cops would never stop them. So I was less stressed about thinking where to go. I could go any street, whatever I want. And for him, he said, you don't understand the value of that. That's priceless. The fact that I don't have to worry about that. That was an amazing example of what Max offers to the people. And if you say that to most of the riders, they're going to come in flocks. If you share that story, people will be interested to work for that company. Imagine, I can give you a job which is less stressful. Everybody wants that. So I thought that was a great example.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. But Jini, this is really one that I believe even organizations and entrepreneurs would love. How do you coach entrepreneurs or organizations to kind of frame their stories for different audiences? Because each time you want to rally money or rally support, it's always important to understand the kind of people you are bringing on board, right? So how do you coach entrepreneurs or organizations to kind of frame their stories for different audiences, donors versus customers versus investors?
So I think for different audiences, do your research. Of course, I always tell the entrepreneurs, when you're pitching, I'm coaching them to pitch, of course, their storytelling, but you could be pitching to your suppliers, customers, investors, like you said. And I always say that do your homework, of course, when you're talking to somebody. Understand what they do. But most importantly, understand their business. And don't be afraid to ask, okay, all the partners you've signed with, what are you looking for when you sign a partnership with, whether it's a supplier or a customer? You ask a customer, when you buy a product, when you buy this, what are you looking for? What's important to you? And try to adapt your pitch around that. It's having a conversation with the people and figure that out. So, and also, like I said, do your research, especially investors. Like you have to be very clear what you want intentionally. If, for example, I remember when we were pitching to investors, like always we're looking for investors that had invested in Africa already because they understand the complexity of the region or even just Nigeria. And ask them as well, why are you investing in Africa? Why are you investing in Nigeria? And look at the portfolio companies they have. And ask them, why? I'm curious about this company. You invested in this company. Why? Have those questions with them. And that's also very important. It's not, you pitching is not about you just pitching the whole time. When you pitch to somebody, it's not just you leading the conversation. It has to be a back and forth conversation between the person you're pitching with. So drive this conversation between them.
Wonderful, 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 wonderful. Let's quickly touch on the last part of the fundraising superpower. What is the biggest mistake people make when trying to tell their story to raise funds? The biggest mistake, because sometimes even many people are learning, but what is the most recurring mistake you've noticed that people make when they are trying to raise funds?
I think the common mistake I would see is people downplay the role of their team. So when you're pitching your business, you're not only pitching your solution and so on. You're also pitching your team. You have to sell your team. I would see slides and decks and they would talk about the business solution, so on. And when they talk about their team, they do 5 seconds and they move on. or the team, they would just talk about give the names and the title. The investor wants to know who the people are behind the organizations. I met an investor who basically would tell me, when I sign a check to a company, it's not because they did a good PowerPoint or because they had an amazing financial model. Ultimately, it's because of the team, the people, the founding team, the leadership team. I love working with them. I trust them. I see they got a hand. I want to understand what's their motivation. I want to understand how do they deal with stress. I want to understand how do they deal with a change in market when you have to pivot your business. How will they deal with it? Those kind of things I want to understand, their characters, their values. So never downplay the team. Share a lot about your background, of every founding team, the leadership team, where they are, and so on. Another example I gave you, an investor even said to me once that he had a fintech company from Argentina pitching to him, 3 founders. Great, but they all have banking background. And he said, I'm a little bit concerned that none of you have IT background. You're a fintech company. You need somebody who has IT background if there's a new technology and you can adapt to that. So that was important for him. So he really looked at the team. He said, there's nothing wrong with the business model. It's very clear what you're trying to do, but the team, I'm a little bit concerned. So never downplay that. Sell your team. It's as important as any other. So I think that's one thing I've noticed that people don't focus a lot of energy in pitching, so to speak. So, and that's very important. I also remind entrepreneurs, don't downplay that. That's very important.
All right, the third session, coaching and mentorship in Africa and beyond. My focus will be on Jini's mentorship work and what he's seeing across the Africa and MENA. So my question now is, you mentor funders across Africa and MENA through multiple networks. What are some exciting trends you are seeing in social entrepreneurship today, both in Africa and across the globe?
Exciting trends. Yeah, interesting question. So I don't know if it's a trend, but I think for me, it's an exciting the agricultural space. It's exciting to see all the innovation. I was part of a committee of an accelerator program. So I wasn't mentoring entrepreneurs, but I was helping the accelerator select the best applications. So this is called SIIS, Accelerator Program for Agricultural Entrepreneurs in Africa. It's funded by GIZ, the German Development Agency. They asked me to come in and we were judging committees and looking at all the applications, having interviews and select the likelihood. What I loved about that is I saw the amount of different ideas around agriculture was amazing. There was some very consistent, same models across different countries, but it's still interesting to see the space in there. Like the idea, the trends of using IT and AI to help provide data to farmers to better manage their crops. That's exciting. And also because agriculture is such a big component of the economy of most African countries. So if you can change that landscape and make farmers more profitable and more sustainable, at the end of the day, that will be beneficial for African communities and of course the world. And they'll be able to export products at a better price. So it's exciting because there's so much potential in my opinion. So that would be the exciting trend that I'm really curious to see how that evolves in the future.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. But actually, another question that I would love for us to really understand is, what gaps do you see in how African founders, African founders communicate their vision, their values, especially to global funders, because the most challenging aspect of fundraising is how one is able to really communicate the main objective, the values, the vision behind what they are trying to do, right? How can one, how do you see, what are the gaps, in this part of the world? For all of us in Africa, you are an African in Switzerland, and I know you've worked in Nigeria, you've worked in Rwanda, Congo, and all of that. What are some of the gaps you see in how African founders communicate their value and vision, especially to global founders like MasterCard and quite a number of them?
The most common, the gaps for African entrepreneurs, based on all the work that I've done mentioning African entrepreneurs across different countries, with different accelerators and different sectors, I think first African entrepreneurs are very smart. They're very smart people because most African entrepreneurs work with very limited resources and they do innovate like crazy. And they have to innovate every day because of the conditions and the environments they live in. So they're very smart. But one of the things that I tend to see is they spend a lot of time on explaining about the service or the product they've developed. Very technical, which is nice, but I think that's not the most important thing. The most important thing for you as an entrepreneur is why would people buy your service and your product? How is that going to change their life? That's the most important thing. So I would focus on that for entrepreneurs. Don't worry about the technical side of your product or your service. Think about how am I going to get the traction? How am I going to get people to buy my service and my product? How is that going to change? And I remember somebody said that at the end of the day, you have to tease the investor, the people you work with. Don't give too much away. You want the investor, he or she, to think, that was interesting, that part, what they said. I would love to call her back and find out more. Because if you give too much away, they'll be able to make an answer very quickly. And it'll be very difficult to go back to them. So yeah, I would say basically focus more on how your service and product is beneficial for the communities. The technical side will come. People will ask you, be prepared for it. But don't focus too much on it, I would say. That's not one thing is kind of common. I would say that. Also, another one is actually common I've noticed with mentors is how to motivate their team. I see a lot of people when they have a small team, they're struggling to motivate their team. That's also a very hard challenge to do, but it's all about how to be an effective leader. And it's really hard to motivate the team. So that's also another one that's not easy to do. But I found some examples, I found ways to figure that out. But yeah.
Wow. But my next question also is, how do you kind of help students and young entrepreneurs connect personal purpose to the SDGs through storytelling? Because you are really big with the SDG goals. So how do young people, young entrepreneurs who are now ready for the job market, how can they connect personal purpose to the SDG goals through storytelling?
The purpose question. Yeah, it's a ever-ending question, so to speak. I would always start with the why. In Sustainable Development Goals, there are 17 of them. From protecting the planet to the oceans, poverty, health, education, so many of them. Figure out what's your purpose. Why that SDG goal, and figure out why. I give you a perfect example. One of the founders I worked with in Nigeria had a biofuel company with cook stoves, basically. So it was interesting. He was trying to create innovative cook stove and biofuel and so on. And when I asked him why he did it, it was a personal story for him. He said basically his grandmother died. He suspected that his grandmother died because of breathing problems. But he believes that because he was cooking with charcoal from a very young age, for those years, she got breathing problems. And he said there must be a way for people to cook without having access to smoke, being exposed to smoke, should I say. So he was trying to find a solution to avoid exposure to smoke. So that was interesting for him. So that's why he got into that field of biofuel and renewable energy. Find that similar purpose. And again, I always tell students as well, don't worry if you don't find it. I found mine in my late 20s. So I found mine very late. But you have to try. Don't be afraid to try different SDGs to figure out your purpose. You might have to try 3 of them before you find out the one you want to do. So be comfortable with that. But it's a journey. Basically, it's a journey. You don't get it like this. It's a journey. You have to really ask yourself inside your soul, what more drives you, motivates you. It could be something that went through something that motivates you. It could be a movie, it could be a documentary. But find out, just explore things. You have to be curious, explore things to figure out what you want to do.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Now, session four. We want to look at strategy and sustainability and scale. How do we link storytelling to impact, sustainability, and long-term donor engagement? So my question will be this. Fundraising isn't just about the first donation. It's also about relationships. So how can storytelling foster long-term donor trust and retention?
Yeah, it's a very, very important question. How do you maintain relationship with donor and donor engagement? I think it's really all about, again, stories. At the end of the day, like I mentioned before in the podcast, I had listened to Melinda Gates talking about, and they were discussing, debating that when it comes to pitching, what is data more important than story? And I think stories are more important. especially donor engagement. Once you've got a donor that's committing to work with you, you got to be able to share stories on a regular basis, how things are going and so on. The more stories you share, the more likely they remember you, to be honest with you. Because donors work in different organizations. So as they remember you, they might recommend it to another donor because you articulate very well the human element of what you're trying to do. It's not all technical, so to speak. It's more about humans. And people remember more about humans. That's something you can relate to more, basically. Because if you come in with the industry-specific technical side, it's difficult to relate because you have to be an expert in industry to understand. When we talk about human behavior, everybody can relate. It's a universal thing. So the more human stories you share, the easier it is to maintain relationship. That's what I've learned, and that's what I try to do and remind myself to do.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Wow. But actually, what's your framework for crafting a signature story today that kind of organization can use across platforms and campaigns?
Framework for stories. Yeah, framework for stories. This is what I recommend to entrepreneurs all the time when you do a presentation. Now, remember, we're all human beings, difficult to keep our attention for a long period of time. So if you have a 30-minute presentation or 20 or 10 minutes, you're going to get the attention of everybody at the beginning, and it's going to die down at the middle, and then everybody's going to be back at the end because it's wrapping up. So I remember one advice I was always told is start with a bang at the beginning and end with a bang. Concrete example, what does it mean? So at the beginning of your presentation, share a story. It could be a personal story about yourself, or your life, or your journey. It could be something that just happened now. It could be something you saw last night that made you start thinking about different things. It could be different things. So think about something that impacted you today, yesterday, or before that you want to share to the audience before you go into the presentation. Sometimes you can do that. Sometimes you can do a quote. So I've seen people put a quote and say, hey, I love this quote because it really summarizes who I am, who I aspire to be. People will remember that quote. Sometimes a picture that tells 1,000 stories. You can have a picture of something you saw, like I want to share this picture because it spoke to me and is relevant, of course, to the presentation. And think of the same thing at the end as well. But one of the things I always tell entrepreneurs to really important thing to do at the end is also focus on what are the 3 things you want people to remember, basically. Every presentation you give, remember that in the audience, you probably presentation number 6, number 10 they've seen in the past week. So they get a lot of information. So you have to remember what are the 3 things you want them to remember. You have to start like, okay, I'm coming up to the end of my presentation about my business, but these are the 3 things I want you to remember leaving this room about my company. It's easy, 3 things. And if they remember, I remember those 3 things. That company was about ABC. Like I gave you the example about the Max Nigeria. They talked about our business is about safe, affordable motor taxis. People will remember that. Safe, affordable motor taxis. It's easy to remember. Okay, I remember what this business was about. It's about safety, affordable, and it's about motor taxis. So that's my advice to people, how for people to remember the framework of a story. That's what I would do, basically.
And viewers, this is a really good tip for you. In case you're trying to start or you've already started, but you now need to build on it, this is a great tip for you. Thank you, Twahi, for that. But if you were to give out some, your top 3 tips for organizations looking to raise their next, let's say 50K to 500K using storytelling, what would be your top 3 tips?
Okay, 3 tips. Yeah, I can think of 3 tips. Be clear on your why. That's so important. Why did you start this business? I see a lot of presentations, they go straight into the problem statement, which is nice. It kind of explains why, but sometimes the problem statement is just the market challenge, the industry challenge, but doesn't say why you started this business. Why is that interesting to you? Why are you involved in this? I mean, you for example, if you have a renewable energy company, why renewable energy? Why not agriculture? Why not waste management? Why did you pick that? Important to really have that prepared. Second tip was, again, human element. Everything you do have a human story around it. Because you might pitch about specific, very technical, healthcare, education, but everybody in the audience is not an expert in those industries. So they might not understand that. So add a human story for them to understand what's going on. And also something that I remember I learned a lot from entrepreneurs, something that actually an entrepreneur told me and I thought was very smart is when you're pitching an investor, don't be afraid to ask questions back to them. Because the dynamic is, they'll be asking a lot of questions to you, but ask them questions as well. So be prepared. Like, for example, if you have an investor, for example, you're an entrepreneur in Malawi, ask the investor, oh, I see you guys, you invest in many different countries. Why Malawi? Why did you choose to select the investors in Malawi? What is your experience working with entrepreneurs in Malawi? When you sign a deal in a business, why do you do it? What's the one thing that convinces you to invest in that company? What was the most exciting thing you saw? Ask them questions to figure out how they're thinking. Be prepared. I'm just giving you a few examples, but I always say that to be prepared for that. That's really important.
Nice. As of when I came across my dear brother Tom Chris and read amazing stuff he's done, from raising up to I think almost 250,000 US dollars for the Ready for Work program he's doing at SFAN, Stars from All Nations. I have a globe. Stars from All Nations, and also looking at a lot of work people have done. And also I work in a school currently, Alphabet Education Centers, and one of the current projects we're running is called the STEM 35 Legacy Project, where we're raising 350,000 US dollars to build a center of excellence, a STEM center of excellence, whose objective is to inspire more young people to pursue STEM related careers. But we have to create a hub where they could actually practicalize and experience STEM, So over the last 2 years, we've worked really hard to raising funding from our members of our communities, to partners, to sponsors, and we've been able to build the first phase of the lab, and that has impacted almost 500 to nearly 1,000 people through the first phase of the project. So for people who are doing stuff like that, again, your top 3 tips will really go a long way to help them scale up. So what digital tools or formats are your favorite for telling powerful stories in today's noisy world?
I don't have any digital tools because I don't specifically focus on the tools. For me, I'm really focusing on how to build a story. There's probably amazing tools to use that, but I don't have it. I'm not an expert in that. So it's difficult for me to give one or recommend one specific tool or digital tool to use. But, for me, I'm more about how to build a story. Then the tool can enhance it, of course. But I won't have any specific tool that I have in mind to recommend. Even though I don't have any recommendation for digital tools for storytelling, I do have a network. So I work with agencies and experts. So if somebody wants, I can always ask people or experts on what tools to use. But I don't have an answer right now. But I can ask people what are the best tools for storytelling, for sure. But I don't have one right now on me.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Now, closing our rapid round. So we've had a great time really talking and engaging with my dear friend Twahi, but I would prefer you call him Jini Sebakunzi. So quick fire fun and insight. What is the one story that changed your life forever, Jini?
Wow, one story. I think I'm gonna focus on my life to make it easier, and I think the Brazil chapter for me. I mentioned it before when I did a 6-month sabbatical, learning about Afro-Brazilian culture. I think that experience for me, I left the private sector. I learned a lot about myself, who I am, what are my values, what kind of work do I want to do. So that had a biggest impact on me. It's a story. I mean, I could talk about it for hours. What I did, what changed my mind. I just had a different mindset, a different approach to how I am. So I always joked there was Jini before Brazil and Jini after Brazil. I always came out a different person, basically. So I think that was probably the biggest story, a change of my life, basically.
Wow. So another thing is, what is a fundraising myth you would wish would disappear totally, 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 totally.
One fundraising myth, I think, would be that the data is more important than stories. The evidence is more important than stories. I think they are as important, but you cannot say that evidence is more important than stories. So I've said it before, stories are way more powerful than data, in my opinion.
Wow. Wow. I think it should come boldly in the description that this must be debunked or must disappear. Last week, our guest, Cristina Maldonado from Portugal, said that one of the leadership myths that need to be debunked immediately is the myth of a leader being a superhero. There is no such thing that a leader must be a superhero. So when people have high expectations, they expect the leader to be perfect. The leader must know everything, must understand everything, but he's just a human, just like everybody else. So your myth is really important. So it must disappear. Thank you so much for sharing. So your all-time favorite speaker or storyteller, who would that be? Who is that?
All-time storyteller. I mean, there's one that I love is Simon Sinek. He's quite famous. He's become a speaker now, but I just love the way he shares his insights. And there's actually a video I use to all my teaching classes. He talks about the why. You can look for it. He has a 3 circles: why, how, and what. And he talks about the why, basically, the why conundrum for people, and figuring out how we always think about what when we should always think about why first. I won't give too much away, but I recommend everybody to check that video. And that video is almost from 2010, but it's still so relevant. It's amazing. It's very long-lasting video, I think, in my opinion. Story, basically. He's very good at telling stories. But another one I discovered recently that was a really good story I didn't know about was Patrick Aoua, who is from Ghana. And he started his own university, the Ashesi University in Ghana, and he's trying to build the best leaders, next leaders, African leaders. And I love the way he shared his story. It was on a podcast done by the CEO of the Mastercard Foundation, Rita, so you can find it easily on Spotify, on Apple. She has basically a podcast with talking to different leaders, including presidents. But this episode that came out a few weeks ago, I loved the way he told his story. He gave some really good, impactful stories that's just very easy to understand what he's trying to do. How to change the education system in Ghana. And I love the way he shared that story. A very humble guy, and he talked about his failures, his fear. He was scared going into it. I shared another great story of a student, the email he sent to him. I'm not going to give it away. I want you to listen to it. And what he says in the email is a simple sentence that summarizes what he was trying to do. And I love that. So I think that's one inspiring leader, storyteller, should I say, that I discovered recently.
Impressive. So, Jini, for the benefit of those watching this conversation, our online audience, or those who will watch later, what is your all-time favorite? I know you've shared who your favorite speaker of all time is, but what is your best advice you've ever received? Maybe from one of your speakers or one of your mentors. But what is the best advice you've ever received in social impact space?
Yeah, the best advice in social impact space. I never forget this. I was in Nigeria working with the founder, and I was struggling to change the mindset of people. In a nutshell, I was trying to change the culture, trying to change the way people worked at things, and my mentor at the time from Acumen, because this was one of the Acumen fellows, said to me, when you work with people, when you want to change people or change their mindset, figure out what their motivation is. What is their why? What drives them? And it's so important in social impact space. It's so important to understand what drives people. Try to understand whether it's communities or suppliers or teammates or donors, what drives them? What keeps them up at night? That's a question I ask a lot of entrepreneurs. What keeps you up at night? And in social impact space, it's important to understand that. When you do the same thing when you talk to customers, when you add this product, what keeps you up at night? What is important for you? What drives you to buy this product? And I think that's important to understand the why. What drives people to do what they do?
Wow. But what is the one thing everyone listening today can do to start becoming a better storyteller, especially in the area of fundraising? Or it could even be leading a team. It could be telling a story about how it all started to ensure that people understand where you're going, buys into your vision, and they are part of it, you know? So, what's one thing everyone listening today can do to start becoming a better storyteller?
And again, for everybody to get ready on the fundraising storytelling, figure out the why of people. When you're pitching to people, figure out your why you want to do this, and also try to understand their perspective. Okay, I'm pitching this investor, but why should I invest in them? Why? What's their motivation? What's their drive? And again, it's an opportunity for you to ask that question to them if they have if you get to meet them face to face or via Zoom. Figure out what their why is, and then figure out whether their values aligns to your values. Because again, I always tell people, an investor is a partner. It's not somebody that just gives you money and that's it. It's a long-term partner. So that person is gonna be helping you go through the good days and the bad days. So figure out the why people what they do is how you tell stories. You talk to most filmmakers as well, like why they tell stories. There's a why. There's something that drives them to do it, and that's how you get to get people's attention, so to speak. So that would be my first thing to figure out, to get used to figuring out why people do. Ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Why? What drives people, basically.
Wonderful. This is now the wrap up. Thank you so much, Jini, for your rich wisdom and passion. You've really unleashed a lot of so much wealth of wisdom and great wisdom nuggets, great tips to living an outstanding life and making an impact, and of course, fundraising. We really, really appreciate. Storytelling isn't fluff, it's the bridge between vision and funding. So heart and strategy is the bridge between vision and funding, heart and strategy. In case you just joined or have some way found your way to the ending part, this is just a proper sum up of what we've listened in few words. Storytelling isn't fluff, is the bridge between vision and funding, heart and strategy. Take that away today. Thank you so much. And of course, I would like to invite the viewers, everyone watching, to connect with Jini and apply his tips. So for you to do that, you need to join the PWI network to be able to connect with likes of Tini Sebankunzi. And of course, you don't need $1 million campaign, just one authentic story told well to change everything. Don't forget that. Let me say it again. You don't need $1 million campaign. Just one authentic story told well can change everything. Don't forget that. Should I say it again? You don't need $1 million campaign. Just one authentic story told well can make an entire difference. So subscribe, share, follow people who inspire, both here on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Threads, on LinkedIn, and of course on TikTok as well. And of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're yet to do so, and share the experience with many people as possible. And of course, stay tuned for the next powerful session coming next week. We're going to be talking a lot on AI, artificial intelligence, what AI agents really are. And of course, the future is really exciting. The question is, are you ready? Thank you so much, Jini, and thank you so much to our viewers. Thank you for making time to be with us, and we really, really appreciate your presence. So thank you for joining us. Until next week, have an amazing weekend. Bye-bye for now.